Hey everyone, Brandon with FastDataScience.ai here, and welcome to yet another episode of This Week in AI. This is the show where I bring you the latest trends in the news in data science, machine learning, and artificial intelligence. And so today I want to start with a little joke. What is my favorite sandwich? If you didn't know, I consider myself somewhat of a programmer, not just a data scientist. I think most data scientists today do, especially if you work in large corporations or large industry. And so, what is my favorite sandwich? It's a J sandwich. Yes, and that also actually gets at some of the theme of today. You'll notice that today's show is titled AI Strategy Stack. And so, if you are interested in learning a little bit more about implementing an AI strategy into your own business or your own projects, stay tuned to the end of the show where I do talk a little bit about the concept that I introduced on social media. If you follow me on the social media channels, you will have noticed that I posted an infographic. I want to go over that a little bit in some more detail at the end of the show today. But before we get there, I do want to talk a little bit about the joke that I just made about J sandwiches. And so what we're seeing, I think, what's really interesting is these generative artificially intelligent models really taking the news feeds by storm. Particularly, a lot of the conversation in artificial intelligence does focus on, lately at least, the power of these text to image generators, things like DALL-E 2, Midjourney, and others. In fact, there are quite a few others that companies like Microsoft, Google, and even Apple and Amazon are starting to go to market with. And what's happening is a similar thing that we saw happening early on with artificial intelligence in the cloud. And that was a sort of commoditization of some large models, that is, models that are trained on large data sets to be able to perform general tasks like speech translation or image detection or object detection, excuse me, in images. Those kinds of things were being released in these cloud infrastructures as basically API endpoints. That is to say that we as data scientists could pass data to those APIs and receive responses that were based off of machine learning models. And so we're seeing this actually kind of accelerate, and it's getting more sophisticated. It's getting even more sophisticated with these now text to image generators. And we're starting to see that companies are being able to take advantage of these more sophisticated models that are being created. And so this week we saw an advance of some of those, in that a lot of these text to image generators are starting to become publicly available. And so the first article that we're going to talk a little bit about real briefly is that small and mid-sized businesses are beginning to take advantage of these text to image AI generators, just as businesses were taking advantage of some of the commoditization of, say, for example, image detection or object detection, speech translation or speech recognition, and some of the other AI services that are available in the cloud and have been available for many years now. We are also starting to see some of these same companies take advantage of these text to image generators. Now, how are they doing it? They're essentially doing it in their marketing materials. Why go ask and pay for an expensive artist or picture or photographer, excuse me, picture taker, that's terrible, photographer to create an image for my marketing campaign when all I have to do is use an image generator, pay a very, very small fee, and experiment with different images, get the one that I want, and use it in my marketing material. One, it's cheaper. Two, it's also a lot faster. So we're starting to see some of this enter into small and medium-sized businesses where they're taking advantage of these essentially these text-to-image AI generators. Now, I think this is sort of the scratching of the surface. I do think there's going to be more to come here. Where I think there's going to be a very significant advance will be in those companies that learn how to leverage these APIs, just as the APIs that were available as cognitive services in the cloud. They're able to leverage them at scale, right? So we want to be able to leverage these things at scale by passing data programmatically, automatically, through the APIs that are made available by these companies to give us access to these sophisticated models so that then we can start to do really cool things with lots of people, not just one or two marketing campaigns, for example, but every single campaign that we run could be different for each individual if we used individual data to create slightly different images for each person. At the end of the show, I'm going to talk a little bit about how a company can set up the right infrastructure to be able to do that. What kind of strategy do you need to be able to scale the use of these kinds of things out? But before we get there, I want to talk about an implication here, because it's not just text to image generation that is becoming a hot topic. It is also starting to scare the music industry. And that is to say that record labels are terrified of the rise of AI music generators. What is it about record labels and being so scared of technology and change? I mean, remember when they freaked out when people stopped buying CDs and started basically using digital music and sharing it for free? They kind of eventually figured out, I think, how to monetize their business. And this is probably going to be another example of that, because you could imagine a situation where you have a text to music AI generator. And so maybe you say, I want a song that is of a particular genre, that maybe has a particular storyline. No, and I want it to be at a particular, using these particular instruments or whatever. And you could create thousands of songs very quickly, curate them, create an album very quickly, and then go ahead and sell it as a record label. So I think their fear is funny, or at least I don't know how accurate this particular article is about their fear and whether it's real. But nevertheless, I do think it does start to show us that the more sophisticated these models get, the more openly available they become, the bigger impact they are going to start to have, not just on large businesses, but also on small and medium-sized businesses, and certainly on the content creators. Obviously, that kind of underlies the whole issue here. There's an ethical problem that I think people are starting to talk about. OpenAI recently partnered with, I believe, Shutterstock to be able to compensate some of the artists that are involved in some of the images that are generated by their model. How they do that, I don't know. Maybe we'll dive into that in a future show. But before I really end the show, what I do want to talk a little bit about is, how do we as businesses take advantage of artificial intelligence? It's something that we're starting to see become more openly available. We started to see it back when the clouds were releasing these APIs as services, which were essentially just machine learning models that we would be able to pass data through for common general tasks. The success of those has been pretty decent. However, there's a lot of downstream additional data science or additional sort of data wrangling that needs to happen with those models. And I think that's probably also going to be a similar case with these more sophisticated models, but not necessarily, because they are starting to produce things that look more like end products rather than just sort of general outputs. And so what I'm going to talk a little bit about before we end the show is how a business goes about actually creating the appropriate infrastructure that they need to be able to take advantage of the commoditization of machine learning and develop their own machine learning practice. Because I think what's going to happen is what we also saw with these AI services in the cloud, again, which is this idea that we can use them to do things with data sources that maybe we weren't able to use in the past, but the outputs are still not specific enough to the business use case that we may have. And so we need additional data science to be able to take advantage of those outputs. And so we're starting to stack these, sort of models together, right, with these services. So what I'm going to present to you is what I talk about, and I've talked about this week in the social channels, is the idea of an AI strategy stack. That is developing a stack of strategies that make your ultimate artificial intelligence strategy come together. And that stack includes 4 critical components as I see it. The first critical component, we're going to zoom in really quickly, is having a data strategy. We need to have a strategy as businesses to bring data in and figure out how to store it in such a way that provides people access to that information internal to our particular company. We need to create data assets. And so we need a data strategy to be able to do that. What kind of storage do we want to use? How do we want to get it in? How do we want to automate bringing that data in? How do we want to govern the data that comes in so that we know that the data are good quality, and so that we know the outputs of using those in downstream analytics are also of good quality? The second component that you need for a successful AI strategy is a data analytics strategy. So once you get your data in, you have it governed, you have it cleaned, you have it, the quality of it is known to you and it's good. The next thing is you need a data analytics strategy. Data analytics is all about creating essentially what I'm going to call semantics, creating business relevant definitions and metrics from the data that are brought in, often in somewhat of a raw form. Maybe they go through some minor transformations, but they're still not ready to be consumed by business stakeholders. That is, they don't have any sort of key performance indication, right? They don't have any sort of business meaning in their state that they are often stored in. And so we need a data analytics strategy to help determine what those KPIs are, what those metrics are that we need to be able to essentially understand our business and advance it more effectively. All right, moving on down, the next step is creating a data science strategy. So once we know the KPIs, the metrics that we need to support the business in order to answer certain questions and to move our bottom line in the right direction, is a data science strategy. And that is understanding what appropriate resources and environments are available to us to be able to take even more advantage of the information in order to predict things in the future, right? Remember, data science is all about managing uncertainty, using probabilities, and so we need a data science strategy that allows us essentially to be able to take that information, take the semantic layer that's created from a data analytics strategy, and then advance that by building predictive models that can then be fed into applications, workflows, and get to essentially the final piece, which is down here, and that is our infrastructure strategy, which probably is better described as our deployment strategy. Once we have all these data assets, we have these metrics, these KPIs, we're feeding these KPIs into predictive models, we're building probabilistic outputs. How do we then make decisions with those probabilistic outputs? We need to feed those into applications, workflows, dashboards, whatever they are. So we also need an infrastructure strategy. And this is how businesses will be able to create a comprehensive and high value AI strategy, is by stacking other strategic initiatives together with the understanding that ultimately the goal is to be able to use the semantics that we create from that data and apply it to our predictive models so that we can do things and respond more proactively. We can create better user experiences in applications. We can create more automation in our workflows, whatever it may be. This is what I see as some of the fundamental ingredients to create a successful AI strategy. It's how I think some of these small and mid-sized companies will be able to compete in the future and take more and more advantage of the increasing openness of these highly sophisticated models that indeed do allow us to do some pretty cool things. Okay, so with that, I want to thank you for joining me today. I want to ask you to please comment, subscribe, share, do all the things. If you learned a little bit today, definitely let me know. I want to keep the conversation going as always. Thank you for listening in. I will see you all next week. And remember, don't just be data-driven, be data science-driven. Until next week, have a great weekend, everybody. Bye.